Was taking a walk the other day and I passed by a sign that said Freaks About Gardevoir Anonymous. Took a look inside and it seemed that they knew you by name. Explain yourself. Hey, what's good, yo? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. As you've likely surmised from the title and thumbnail, yes, we are still in fact talking about Pokemon Winds and Waves, though after this week, I feel like it might slow down a bit. Our next Pokemon Presents likely isn't until like the end of the year, and I don't have any real hope that we're gonna get any major information on Pokemon Winds and Waves in the next Nintendo Direct. We still need a lot of information about other games dropping on the Switch too. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, there are three major things that I really want to focus on in regards to Pokemon Winds and Waves. One of those things is what kind of gimmick we might be receiving for this game. Make sure to pay attention to the community tab because I really want to open this one up for a group discussion. Second, I really want to talk about what kind of story we'll be receiving and how to perfect that. But for now, the one that we're going to be focusing on is the difficulty situation going into these games. It's no mystery to anybody that's been keeping up with the franchise and the mainline games for the last couple of years that the difficulty is not very difficult. And having an easy game in of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's kind of a problem when you have a very consistent base of people that's been playing these games their entire lives and know them like the back of their hands. Long and short of it is, I think it's about time we start getting really in depth when it comes to difficulty, and I think that Winds and Waves is a pretty damn good place to start. So I'm gonna need you to do me a favor real quick. I need you to kick your shoes off, put your feet up, put down the drill and the screw. You're not slick, you're not using that one either. You already know it all by now. Go into your fridge, grab a nice cool glass of Coca-Cola. Bust open that Krabby leg, deep fry it in some ketchup, and make sure to put some teriyaki sauce on there while we talk about the difficulty situation in Pokemon Winds and Waves. First things first, let's talk about the modern issue that we've been facing. This is something that we've talked about a couple of times beforehand, but I really don't think it can be reinstated enough that these games have had no real challenge when it comes to the base game. The reason that they do this is likely because they don't want to form any kind of barrier to entry for newer players. Given the fact that Pokemon as a franchise has pretty much always been pertained to a younger audience, they want to make sure that said audience can get in and have fun and play through the games with little to no trouble. I also have to imagine that this is one of the reasons why they go out of their way to make sure that pretty much every game for the most part is a standalone game. Simply put, they want to make sure that that kid that's walking through the store sees the game, convinces their parent to pick up the game for them, and they start playing it and they have a good, smooth, easy transition into the game and love it so much that they continuously buy products and more games following. And that's all fine and dandy. You want to make sure that the younger audience has just as good of a time as anybody else playing video games. Nothing wrong with that. The problem is that you succeeded in this 30 years ago. Hi, how are you? The kid in that scenario? Yeah, that's me. It's been the same consistent, consecutive strategy for the last 3 decades. You guys have done it. You have garnered a consistent audience that will pretty much always be here, probably for the rest of their lives. But now, by continuing to do this exact same strategy over and over and over again, we have created a massive imbalance. I and you guys who are probably hitting your 20s, 30s, maybe even 40s at this point have been playing Pokemon for a very long time now. Most of us are at the point where we know the type chart and matchups by heart. Because you gotta understand, in the early days of playing Pokemon, we didn't have a situation in which the move list, whenever we would pull it up during a battle, would tell us distinctively which moves were super effective against the Pokemon we're fighting against. We had to know that already. And that's just it right there. There was a point where they trusted us to be able to learn and to grow and understand the game for ourselves. During pretty much every encounter, we were expected to run into a Pokemon or into a trainer, get into a battle, and determine what their typing was based on how they looked and what moves they were using. It pretty much forced us into a trial and error situation, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Obviously, on top of that, we were also doing a lot of catching and understanding of each individual Pokemon so that we would know what their types were every time we would get into a battle with them outside. However, initially, going into these battles without those guardrails made us retain our memory of these type matchups better. This is a prime example of something that doesn't happen nearly as much anymore. Hell, even in Pokemon Champions, it tells you directly what moves are super effective against the Pokemon that you're fighting. And it's just a little sad because, again, it's almost like they cannot find it within themselves to trust new players to understand the game on their own. They are simply too afraid that players will get way too frustrated, put the game down, give them a bad review, and then never look at the games again. Which is super ironic considering the fact that that's still happening, but not because the games are difficult, but because the games aren't high quality like they should be a lot of the time. That's beside the point though. What I'm trying to get at here is that they have now struck a major imbalance when it comes to old players and new players. They have all of their focus on newer players, and even then, especially when it's older players getting into these games for the first time, they can't trust them to go out of their way to understand the game on their own. So for the newer, younger audience that are getting into the games for the first time, they aren't really truly being tested because everything is pretty much handed to them. And then for older, newer players that are getting into the series for the first time, they are getting frustrated because they feel like they're getting handheld through the game and are never able to go out on their own and really understand the game for themselves. And it's a very similar frustrations for older veterans like you and I that have grown up with this series and understand it like nobody's business. We boot up these games, and for the first couple of hours, 9 times out of 10, a lot of us are extremely frustrated because we are being looked at as brand new players. And while that's technically true for newer games like Winds and Waves, we know Pokemon already, and we want to be acknowledged for that. Because now, pretty much every time I boot up one of these games, I'm fully expecting a pretty much 2-hour tutorial that won't let me move until they are fully sure that I understand every single little thing about Pokemon that I have already known for the past 20 plus years. And even then, going forward, I'm never expecting any real challenge because I already know my type matchups, so there's nothing that can really stop me. I pretty much bulldoze my way through every game now. The only times in recent years that I could think that I've had actual trouble with these games was during the Leon fight my first time through, and during the Elite Four in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But not because they were necessarily challenging, but because the difficulty spike was random as hell. And it's not that I even lost, they just had to make me sit up a bit and actually think about some strategies, because I was like, wait a minute, they actually kind of putting the hands on me. And you know what, Volo was pretty scary too, but again, that's like a whole different discussion because I don't even know if he's base game or post game at this point, whatever. The point is, there were some challenges here and there. But like, come on now, just a little handful of challenges throughout these like 20-hour plus, like massive playthroughs of all of these different games. That's a little insulting. Because you gotta think about it this way, we have been so lacking in challenge in Pokemon that we had to create our own challenge, which is essentially just nerfing ourselves through Nuzlocks. Don't get me wrong, I love Nuzlocking, it's a very fun thing to do, especially on repeat playthroughs with these games. But the simple fact that long-term players have had to invent their own form of challenge for repeat playthroughs to be more fun for these games is kinda ridiculous, no? Because honestly, without randomizers and Nuzlocks, I have a hard time justifying a lot of repeat playthroughs. But something that would definitely make something like Nuzlocks or randomizers a lot more interesting is if these games actually had a little bit more oomph to them, a little bit more difficulty, and a little bit of a bigger punch, a bigger bite. Over the years, as I've gotten older, I have spent a lot of time pining over the potential ideas of how they could better acknowledge older players. I've always wanted to play as older characters in these games. I've always wanted to actually curate my responses when it comes to NPCs asking me something or making actual decisions that affect the world around me. Growing up, I've played plenty of games that have made me make really tough decisions that affected the people and the world around me within those games. And I feel like that's really impacted me growing up and made me a better person in a lot of ways. But them trusting me to make certain decisions and that I could handle the challenge that they threw at me made a much more lasting impression. What they've done with Pokemon over the last 2 decades has grown frustrating, to say the least. To be clear though, not that the games aren't enjoyable, it's just that there is that frustrating aspect of the fact that I, as an older player, am just not acknowledged, and it really sucks going through every single one of these new games with that exact same problem. So, I offer you a couple of potential ways in which we can help alleviate these problems just a little bit. I really don't think that anything that I have listed here is too out of pocket or too unreasonable. And so, for Pokemon Winds and Waves, I offer you an easy 4-step plan to striking a balance with difficulty. Something that acknowledges your older fanbase that's been playing the games for their entire lives, while also finding a way to cater to a new audience without making them upset. Step 1. Add difficulty options. I don't know what it is with Pokemon specifically, but they are pretty much the only turn-based RPG in the modern era that seems to not have difficulty options for some reason. Hell, even outside of the RPG space, plenty of games have difficulty options. I don't understand why Pokemon specifically is so incredibly allergic to that. Apparently, to my knowledge, they only did this one time in Pokemon Black 2 specifically, for some reason. The challenging difficulty is exactly what you think it is. You get stronger AI, they have better teams, they have better strats, and they have held items. That's cool, that's dandy. But the problem here was that not only did you have to beat the game in order to unlock that difficulty setting, you didn't even technically unlock that difficulty setting for your own game. You would have to send the key for the difficulty to another copy of Black 2 or White 2, meaning you would need to own a second DS and another copy of one of those two games to send the key to so that you could unlock the difficulty options. But, like, there's no purpose to that at that point because you've already beaten the game. Why would you go out, spend more money on an entirely new handheld console and another copy of the game? Of course, you could send it to your friend, but there's no guarantee that they would want something like that. Maybe they already like the difficulty that they're playing on, so you're just kind of assed out. You just have this key and you get nothing to do with it. Now, I bring this up specifically because if I'm remembering correctly, back during like the major Terra leaks, they had a couple of like interviews or conversations that were recorded regarding Generation 5 as a whole. Essentially, the sales numbers as well as the reviews for Generation 5 made them very nervous to go anywhere near something like that ever again. And you could tell that they got really nervous about telling stories like they did in Generation 5. And I have to imagine they also got a little scared about the mechanics that they implemented not sitting right with people. One of those very mechanics being an unlockable challenge mode. Now, here's the thing about RPGs. It's not uncommon to unlock a much harder difficulty after you've beaten the game. The difference is that most other RPGs already start with a hard mode unlocked. With this extra tough challenge mode, it's usually something that will really test your skills and knowledge on everything you've learned in the game to a point where it's actually really scary. In the case of Generation 5, you were basically unlocking the base hard mode, and that's something that probably should have been available right from the get-go. But unfortunately, when it comes to situations like this, they probably got the wrong idea about the game overall and decided not to approach any of the ideas that they introduced in that generation. So overall, it seems like they've kind of just shied away from adding any form of difficulty options altogether, and that really sucks. And to be clear, I don't know if this is an actual fact or anything like that, that's just a working theory. Anyhow, the point is, they need to go about adding difficulty options right from the get-go when you first start up the game. Every time we boot up a new generation of Pokemon, it seems like they have us making some form of like ID or passport or some form of trainer card or something along those lines. When it comes to Winds and Waves, I would love a situation in which we obtained a trainer license, and while we were creating our character and everything on that license, there's an option for what level of trainer you are. Are you a novice? Have you never used Pokemon before? Are you well versed? You're familiar with Pokemon and getting general idea of it? Or are you an expert? Maybe you're coming from a different region that you've already championed and you're moving to a new one for a different experience, and you know, we don't really need to acknowledge that in the story or anything, but we have this here just in case, you know what I'm saying? Because overall, I feel like that's a very fair and respectful way to acknowledge the older players who are already good and well familiar with Pokemon and would love to have a challenge for their first run through of this new generation of Pokemon. I myself would love to feel the full weight of whatever this new game has to offer us, and I think the best way of doing that is to add a mode that really puts it to the test. I do want to see gym leaders with full parties of 6 every now and again. I do want to see them utilizing held items and actual effective strategies that I can implement into my own strategies. I would love to develop and test my skill throughout the base game so that when I'm going online, it's not like I'm in completely unfamiliar territory again. Because I'm telling you, playing Pokemon casually and then hopping online with really competent players will really let you know that you don't understand shit about Pokemon. And I fully do believe that this is a very solid way of alleviating that a little bit. And of course, alternatively, you have the easy and normal options. Maybe if you're already good and well versed when it comes to general RPGs, you would want to pick that well versed option, or if you're completely new to Pokemon and RPGs in general, you would want to pick that novice option. And I imagine those options speak for themselves, right? Maybe for the easy option, you want to just experience the story, get to know all these new Pokemon without having too much stress when it comes to the gameplay. Obviously, the well-versed option, alternatively, would have a perfect balance between the gameplay, the story, and whatever else. And then, would you look at that? You have struck the perfect balance in between acknowledging your older players and still catering to newer players or players that are generally familiar with RPGs to transition them easily into Pokemon. And I think that's more than fine. Step 2. A gradual difficulty incline that could serve as a natural progression for players. The thing about most modern Pokemon games is that their difficulty seems to be mostly consistent. Of course though, like I mentioned earlier, there is some random steep inclines of difficulty that pretty much come out of nowhere and catches everybody off guard. I really do think there is a much better way to strike that balance. Better gradual difficulty increasing is something that should happen amongst pretty much every game you play at this point. Pokemon does do this, of course, but it's never steep enough to really feel like you're getting challenged. But we could and should be seeing a lot of different instances throughout these games where the difficulty is increasing in real time. Obviously, the first and second gym wouldn't be expecting too much of you, you're just getting a hang of the game. That's no big problem, right? But maybe that third gym, they're throwing in a couple of protects and sword dances and stuff like that. Okay, very interesting. Maybe the gym after that, you see a couple of leftovers and things like that. Something real odd. Okay. Maybe on the 6th or possibly even the 7th gym, we're witnessing a baton pass strategy. 8th gym absolutely needs a full team of 6, and they're doing something absolutely dastardly with the team that they so happen to be rocking. Of course, I fully believe that all of the trainers and rival battles leading up to those next gyms should definitely help set expectations for what you might be walking into. And then, maybe then, by the Elite Four, it wouldn't be all that crazy to see some real competitive strategies being utilized amongst them. Cause I'm telling you right now, the Sinnoh Elite Four, they were not moving on that type of time in OG. But obviously you get what I'm getting at. If we had a gradual incline and we're introduced to all of these different concepts going through the game, and we're seeing all these different unique strategies and things like that, we will be building our teams to properly accommodate for that. And in turn, we end up with a fight with the Elite Four or the champion or whatever the final tournament situation we could end up having that doesn't feel like we got a difficulty spike that got us out of left field. In my personal opinion, I think that makes plenty of sense. The more you implement a proper gradual incline like that one, the less people will be upset when they get hit with something really crazy by the end of the game. And that way, when we get a super challenging boss that actually gives us a little bit of trouble, we're not angry about it, we're just working through different strategies to take them down, and we're talking to our friends about it forever. I deem this one a stricken balance. Step 3. Easing up on the tutorials and either making them optional or making them a lot shorter. Like I mentioned earlier, starting up repeat playthroughs, especially in later generations of Pokemon, can be kind of abysmal sometimes. One of the reasons for that is because it is so frustrating to be taught the exact same mechanics and information that you have learned throughout your entire life for the 50th time. And the fact that the game won't even just allow you to acknowledge the fact that you understand this game, even if you are coming in on a second playthrough on the same console, is kind of ridiculous. For the last 2 generations, it's been the exact same rival fight. You start off with both of your starter Pokemon, you hit them with a super effective move, they act amazed that you know your lineup. It's the same exact thing. I will not be doing this a 3rd time, guys. I don't want to read the commentary on how good I am at Pokemon battles. I'm trying to get through this battle and get on my way. So I think my proposal is pretty damn obvious here. The question could be as simple as, have you used Pokemon before? Yes or no. If I click yes, then I should be able to just battle my rival, and they don't need to teach me how to catch Pokemon. They don't need to give me anything. I could just go on my way. If we do have to have a battle, that's fine, but I don't think we need to go through all the hoops and hoopla. Alternatively, for newer players, you can just give them the experience that we've had for the last couple of generations and make it so that they are being taught as they play. Obviously though, if there's some new mechanics like the gimmick or something like that that we obviously won't understand on a first playthrough, then I'm more than down to have a tutorial teach me how to properly utilize it. Otherwise, if I'm coming in on a 2nd or 3rd playthrough, I don't need to be taught for the 5th time how to use this new gimmick. I understand it already. But essentially, having the option to skip or at least minimize the tutorial so that we could get through things a little faster will incentivize more and more playthroughs, and it'll overall just bring positivity to the experience, I believe. And now for step 4, my final proposal, which is getting a little bit more strict with the limitations. Now, unlike the other 3, this one's definitely a little bit more optional and I feel like won't make or break anything if it's added or not. But personally, when it comes to pretty much anything, I feel like people are more inclined to learn and they understand things a lot better when they're limited in what they're able to work with. For example, they aren't really all that strict with the level limit anymore, it feels like. The whole Pokemon not listening to you thing is now pretty much exclusive to traded Pokemon. And this is good. This is a fine implementation. It keeps newer players from cheating and having somebody who beat the game already trade them over like a level 100 or something so that they can just ransack the game and have an easy time. That's not fun for anybody. But I do feel like if we were to kick it up just a notch and have it so that Pokemon going over the level limit based on the badge that you have actually don't properly listen to you again, I feel like that in of itself could make things a little bit more interesting and gradually a little bit more difficult. Back in the day, I played this fan game called Pokemon Reborn, and within that fan game, they were extremely strict with that level limit. If you passed level 25 before getting your first gym badge, those Pokemon wouldn't even dare to spit in your soup. You are disgusting. You are nothing. They will not listen to you. Overall, I think the way that that game's difficulty was handled was way too much, way too soon, but I like the general ideas of how they went about it. And having that stricter level limit, you know what? I wouldn't be too mad about it if we had something like that implemented here. When you have limitations and you're forced to get creative, you're gonna get creative, and I think this is a perfect scenario to create that situation. Again though, as far as everything is concerned, I don't think this is one that's like a make it or break it if it were to be added or completely ignored. I feel like not having that level limitation makes it so that people can comfortably train their Pokemon to whatever level they feel like they need to, so that they can comfortably get past gym badges and whatever other challenges may come their way. So that's fine, that's whatever. This one I'm not too like keen on per se, but you know, if we did have to have some form of way to implement some form of challenge, I think that this could be a good way to handle it. That being said, these are the good couple of ways I think that they could go about implementing some form of challenge in Pokemon Winds and Waves. Obviously, I don't necessarily think that they're gonna do any of these things. I would love it if they were to consider some other form of possibility, especially if we could have some kind of level scaling situation, something that we were sorely missing in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Because don't get me wrong, I do love the aspects of Pokemon that make it like that cozy, fun little kick back and enjoy your little JRPG situation. I would love a situation in which I do have the option for more difficulty so that I could have a much harder challenge on my hands and I could get a little bit more invested too. But like I said, a lot of the problems stem from the fact that I'm simply not a kid anymore, and it's just frustrating to not get acknowledged for that. And I have to imagine a lot of you guys are feeling the same way, but hey, you know what? Maybe that really is just me. So that just about wraps it up for this one. I would definitely like to do some form of Pokemon Champions video sometime this week, so keep an eye out for that. I just need to, actually, get my grind up, get my grind up, you know what I'm saying? Get my status up in Pokemon Champions so I don't look like a complete fool, you know what I'm saying? I just haven't had enough time to play like I would have liked to, but I will be doing some form of content for Pokemon Champions. We might do a stream sometime this week. I'm definitely going to be streaming a different game. For anybody that's curious, Pragmata, I really want to play that later this week when it drops on Friday, so I will probably, it seems, have a day to stream that. So if you guys want to come through for that, that would be swell as hell. But I'll leave it at that for now. Enough of the shameless plugs. I'm passing the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree? Well, also, it's going to be on second channel. I don't want to restart this take. So I'm passing the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that adding some form of difficulty options, making it so that we get a little bit more strict with the limitations, maybe adding some gradual difficulty inclines and easing up on the tutorials could make it so that the older players, the people that have been playing these games their entire lives, aka you and me, could have a much more enjoyable time with Pokemon because we're being respected as older Pokemon fans? Or am I tripping? Pokemon doesn't need to get any harder. It's for the kids. It's going to be for the kids, and we should just worry about online stuff, and that's where we're going to get our difficulty. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone, so thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!